All right, we got Sean is here. Overcoming Layer 8 control failures, engaging your staff in the fight against cyber criminals. You ready?
I'm ready.
You sure?
Yeah. Taking on cyber criminals is easy, right?
That's the easy part, right? The tech's easy. Layer 8's, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Once you get the money, then you get the people, then you get the technology. I might be getting that whole thing wrong, but it's late in the day. All right, sir, with that, please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. The idea for this talk, and I know it's a quick slot, so I'll post the slides in that download channel shortly. Really, the intent I was looking to cover here is, technology is most of what we do, and we can spend a lot of time focusing on securing the technology, and then we all know it falls back to you send a phishing email, you place a phone call, and someone just hands you their credentials, and all that time and money spent on the latest and greatest technology was all for nothing, right? So what I wanted to do is leverage some of the experience I have, which I'll talk about, the obligatory bio slide here. Main takeaway, two things really. One being that I work in an IT assurance and security consulting organization, so that puts me in probably 50 to 60 different companies a year. And then the second one being a student at the SANS Technology Institute, and I'll mention why that. Before we jump into the details, a few things to talk about when I'm talking about security awareness training. You kind of hear that. So awareness, when I'm talking through things here, really focusing on a link in a phishing email, not Joe from IT who called you from this number you haven't seen before and is asking for your password. Where when we're talking about training, we're actually teaching new skills. And a lot of times the intent is for this to be really specific. So folks in accounts payable are being trained CEO impersonation emails, or even folks in IT are being trained on how to is that person on the other end of the line. So just a quick clarification there. So one of the things that we see a lot in these organizations, and something that here that was taught in SANS Management 433, that's all about maintaining and monitoring a security awareness program, is that a lot of times we see these security awareness programs being run by...
A quick heads up, your
Sure.
mic seems to be going in and out, so just make sure the placement stays good and close, okay? Actually, I think that somehow made it worse.
How about now?
There it is. Now it's
I will
back.
not move. Okay, perfect.
Now it's working just fine.
All right. Did we catch, I guess, the importance here of awareness and training? Well, you guys can read that. So what I wanted to cover here is the fact that not only is this covered in that full course, but something that I see a lot is either human resources or the compliance department are charged with implementing these security programs, but they're not the security experts. So a lot of times what we end up seeing is something that's really driven by whatever compliance requirements the organization has to follow. So more often than not, it's going to be once a year. It's going to cover really the bare minimum requirements that is outlined in whatever law or regulation is there. And it's really going to be cookie cutter across the organization. When I talk to these folks, a lot of times we'll hear IT or information security is too busy, right? They're focusing on chasing down all these alerts they're getting from different malware pop-ups or phishing attacks coming in. They don't necessarily have the time to focus on kind of like the chicken or the egg scenario. They're constantly chasing the chicken around without actually get involved in that program beyond being. Oftentimes, have IT and IS folks that aren't even sure what's being covered. They've been for years. They don't really remember the reporting process, and they think HR is doing something, but they're really not sure. And like I said, IT or IS is too busy chasing those alerts where they can't actually. What I wanted to do, and I know the numbers here aren't great, I guess that's an issue with surveys in itself, but I wanted to pull some folks around what they're seeing as far as, and we're still seeing a really big majority driven by annual programs that are pre-recorded online. The assumption there is that it's very vanilla, generic programming that's given to every employee, and chances are it's probably something that's a few years old. What was actually nice, here are some of the other questions, is a handful of folks that responded actually noted that their training focuses on home devices, which is something I'm going to touch on, and that there actually is a really involved process for tracking updated. And the last one, there actually was kind of surprising results here that folks are all updated for common.
Hey, just a heads up, you're going in and out again. Now we're pretty still out. Yep, still not back. Just barely hear you.
Let me.
Yep.
The headset. Let's
Okay.
do this. Is this any better?
That's better.
Okay. We'll ditch the headset.
There we go.
So one of the items here when we saw IT and IS was actually involved in the development process is the curse of knowledge. A big thing here, and it's something I've noticed I struggle with as well, is making assumptions based on your experience. Really making assumptions not only on what the audience will know, but what they're interested in hearing about. And what we start to struggle with and what we really don't like to hear is, well, the end users are too dumb, so we need to make this as simple as possible. You might need to make things simple for certain folks, but it's not because they're dumb. And that's one of those, I guess, opinions that can really hurt an organization from a security training perspective. One of the things I like to point out is, you may be the security wizard. What are the chances you're able to balance the books at the end of the quarter with all sorts of different stock option requirements and everything? These end users are really good at their own jobs. They just may not have the security understanding you have. And when we start to see the fog behavior model, you start to see that as your ability increases in certain things, the motivation will start to drop. And what I mean by that is it can start to skew your opinion on really what's important. One of the examples I had here that based on, I guess, current events with the COVID-19 items is risk estimation as far as travel. I think a lot of folks have, heard of that comparison between flying and driving before. But when you start to look at the numbers, driving is significantly more dangerous. But if you don't really understand all the things that go into air travel, those risks can look, really intimidating, and that may be something you want to try and avoid. The other area where we start to see IT and IS folks start to miss the mark is focusing on the wrong thing. So starting to update training and maybe push out really frequent notices to your end users based on current events in the news. And this one can be really tough and is really dependent on the organization, because what you don't want to do is get to the point of alert fatigue of those end users, especially if you're starting to bombard them with things that are not relevant to them. What I mean here is if you're providing information as an informational kind of take-home thing for the employees, and it's something that they're likely to face either in their day jobs or at home, that can be really beneficial, because we'll talk about how that can carry over to protecting the corporate environment. But if you're constantly bombarding, say, the marketing department or the sales department with the latest, technical jargon of the most recent APT attack, they're going to start to tune you out, and then all of a sudden, what looks like a really solid and well-informed program from IT is again missing the mark with those end users. One of the great quotes that I saw here is never letting a breach go to waste. And what I mean by that is if you are involved with building out your program, there is a certain amount of time after any big organization is in the news with any sort of breach or security incident where folks are paying attention and executives are likely thinking, could that be us? Are we doing the right things to actually stop this from happening? And so one of the things you want to do is take advantage of that increased awareness at the executive level and actually start to work towards getting executive buy-in. And what we want to see there as far as something that's going to have success long-term is probably not what everyone wants to hear, is have a project plan in place. The big thing, and it was actually just touched on a few moments ago, is executives love seeing different graphs and measurements. So build out a process where you can actually identify, we'll do X, and if we see Y, that means it's working, and be able to show some tangible improvement along the way. Also, don't go straight for the cash. A lot of people would love to rush to saying, hey, that's great, there's this attack. We don't want to be the next news story. We need $600,000 for this new tool to prevent it from happening. That might be the case, but you also might be able to leverage existing tools, open source tools. There may be other ways without a massive price tag, and maybe that expensive tool is what you need, but that might be further down the line. If you can make incremental improvements along the way, you can start to get that buy-in and have them understand exactly what you're doing and where you do need to bring in that extra tool. Starting small. You don't need to solve your entire organization's problem in one day. It doesn't need to be one project to fix everything. Really sticking with the theme of being able to show what you're doing is making a positive impact for the organization, and building up that internal trust and internal credibility that the ideas you're putting forward are for the good of the organization and are what you're ultimately working towards, is getting a more secure environment. Now, this next one, totally dependent on the organization, I realize, but it happens enough that I want to mention it, is you may have to ditch the hoodie. There are certain organizations, and I think it's becoming more and more popular, where dress code is less important. A lot of the organizations I work with are in the financial services industry and the healthcare industry. And the people that are signing those checks or approving the big products and projects don't necessarily understand, or maybe don't want to understand, the typical IT or hacker culture. And here you have to use some of those social engineering skills we use against end users, against the executives, kind of dress the part, fit in with them, start to build the rapport with the executives that you need to actually win over to your side to get these projects up and running. A few books here, there's a lot of really good books and studies and everything around working with other people and getting some of this buy-in. These 4 I did want to call out, and they really do help you understand putting yourself in the other person's shoes. So whoever the recipient of training or security control you're trying to address, all 4 of these books touch on different areas to help you, again, try and avoid that ignorance of knowledge and understand what the end user is seeing without your security wizard skill set. And at the same time, you need to take the time to understand the business. Without understanding why the end user is doing certain things, that's going to contribute to you missing the mark on that training initiative. Common examples we see is IT or IS wants to, block all sorts of removable media, probably with good reason. There's a lot of different malicious attacks. But especially in the industries I work in, there are some folks that actually require different USBs or file transfer, web apps, all sorts of different things that they actually need to do their job. And if you're trying to block that, they're going to find a way to really get their job done and likely circumvent some of your controls. Some other things that we see is secure email portals can be miserable to work with on the receiving end. I'm not sure how many different portals folks tend to work with, but if you're trying to log into really any of them, Mimecast, Proofpoint, Zix, any of the big ones there, it's a really clunky experience. And if the sales team is being forced to encrypt every email that goes out with attachments, regardless of the sensitivity of the content in those attachments, they're going to start finding a way to work around that, because now they may be losing sales based on a poor user experience on that end. So really make sure you're able to focus on what these folks have to do to get their job done. And then really make sure that you're able to get them to understand why security is important. You know, we used to hear IT or security being the department of no. You really want to change that opinion in your organization. Get them to understand why you're pushing certain initiatives, while you also want to understand what they're doing in their day job and figure out how you can work together. Another post that went up that I do want to highlight from Lance is he just had an awesome talk and post on building out security culture. So there's a great reading list for you here as well. The last thing I wanted to highlight is we've seen a lot of success in tailoring some security programs to individual benefits, meaning how can you teach that end user how to protect themselves, their kids, their family members at home. You know, more and more we're seeing elderly relatives have issues with, you know, whether it's the IRS scam or a social media account being taken over. Having things like a lunch and learn program, a personal device review or checklist, things like that. You know, there's considerations as far as liability. You don't want to be getting caught up with that. But if you're teaching people how to actually protect their family members, they're going to pay attention a little more, because that hits closer to home. Work may just be work to that person, but if you're teaching them how they can keep their 80-something-year-old grandmother from being scammed by an IRS scam again, they're going to pay attention, and those behaviors or the training on how to spot those sorts of things are going to become part of their day-to-day habit, and they're actually going to be able to start protecting the corporate information without necessarily realizing. The last bit here is just making sure security awareness, we need to move away from that being an HR or a compliance function. We really do need to get all of this through to an organizational-wide understanding. We've seen a lot of great success when really departments have fun with this. You can have competitions between departments as far as, hey, we had 100% of the accounting folks report the last phishing email, so we're going to give them a shout out to the whole company and really start to drive some of that internal friendly competition. And getting that buy-in, when someone has the opportunity to contribute to the material, they're more likely to pay attention and put the effort in. Very last thing, the wall of sheep. I don't know how many folks are familiar with that. It really is entertaining, but may not be the best thing to do in your corporate environment. It may be fun for IT. A lot of folks do not enjoy being called out in a negative light. And what I like to actually do is flip this around and get back to that wall of fame mentality, where you actually are highlighting folks that are reporting phishing emails or reporting suspicious people and are actually doing all the things we want to see. People like getting congratulated. To do that, really highlight the successes, and you'll start to see those numbers increase. So the last few things, if you take nothing else away, any of your pitches and trainings, keep them short and non-technical. Keep that focused on really the key things folks need for their job while being secure. Make sure you're providing those updates to leadership. They do like seeing graphs and different graphics on where things are getting better. Play the long game. You don't need to fix everything at once. Make sure you can address small wins. With that, slides and links to a bunch of different things included there. If you don't want to scan the QR code, I will also post the link into the slides chat.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And by the way, I've got a little bit of presentation tips for you. I want you to take that headset that you were using and just throw it against the wall as hard as you possibly can and never use that thing again.